Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings, to the We Are Changes news show that specifically caters to the people who distrust megacorporation, technocrats, banksters, and of course, governments. This show is specifically made for you because it's sponsored by you, because it's the only way we can even exist as an independent news organization. Since, obviously the people we rail against censor us, demonetize us, and pretty much screw us out of the bottom line, and the only thing keeping us going is people who go to wearechange.org/donate and make sure we can continue to do this job. Now, moving forward, there's a lot of things, especially now in the news, that make the average person go, what the family-friendly show tarnation is going on here? And one of the biggest stories that I'm seeing now that makes me go, what in the tarnation is going on is, of course, what is happening right now in China. Now, of course, I'm not just talking about the economic trade wars that we have been covering very heavily on this YouTube channel, but on China's social credit ratings that actually has the government watching every single one of your moves and then deciding what kind of good citizen you are. Now, this is not just a story from 1984, but it is actually real life. Now, of course, this was sold to the Chinese people by their government, saying that they would only use this against really bad people in society and ostracize them for their bad behavior on everyone else. But also people who question the authority of the state are being caught up in this social credit score and are being targeted for questioning the government. Even this journalist, Li Hu, who's a Chinese journalist that worked on an anti-corruption campaign of the Communist Party of China, who was just listed as untrustworthy into this new Chinese social rating system, who now can't even book a flight, can't buy any property, and his children are not even allowed to go to private school. Now, Liu was actually asked by a court in China to apologize for some of his work, which he did, and the court even deemed it that he wasn't sincere enough in his apology to the Chinese Communist state, and henceforth he is still on this untrustworthy list in this social rating program in China right now, which the list is growing over time because of facial recognition surveillance cameras in China expanding, as well as AI, artificial intelligence companies that are helping participate in this program that judge people if they do community service, buy Chinese-made products, or even if they smoke in a non-smoking area, which would result in you being punished by the state, banning you from flying or getting on trains, slowing down your internet speeds, banning your kids from the best schools, stopping you from getting the best jobs, keeping you out of the best hotels, and having your reputation tarnished as your name would be publicly announced as a bad citizen, which, according to some estimates, already 9 million people are on that list with low scores in this rating system, which still hasn't gone into full effect. And according to the Chinese, by 2020, every citizen would be getting ranked. Now, of course, this has very serious implications since this is a statist's wet dream, and of course the ultimate tool that governments will use to extort power and pressure on its own citizenry from questioning its actions, which slowly could reverberate to a similar US system, which I'm going to be talking about in just a moment. But it's not just questioning corruption that gets you in trouble in China. It's also rolling your eyes, like this reporter who during a government press conference rolled her eyes when a fellow reporter asked a softball question, which automatically made her a meme and go viral, which the Chinese state immediately banned all mentions of, which the Chinese government sent out an urgent notice to all the media out there, telling them that anything posted must be deleted without exceptions, and there must be no mention of this episode. And hooey, if that wasn't enough for the Orwellian nightmare, we have the next article about Chinese factory employees who now have to have brain scanners in order to stop the workers from making mistakes before they happen. Yeah, private companies are now being encouraged to deploy new brain scanners for factory workers that, of course, monitor abnormalities in emotions and thought patterns, that would monitor workers' brain waves and detect spikes in anger, anxiety, or even depression, and then therefore be dealt with management. And I poop you not, this is already in use, but only expanding all throughout China right now, which is pretty much at the tip of the spear when it comes to the technological enslavement of humanity. But don't worry, the United States is not that far behind, which the United States is now proposing that visa applicants to the United States have to hand over 5 years worth of social media history. In the United Kingdom, right now, the police could download all of the private contents on your phone within minutes without even a warrant, and they proudly have their own Chinese journalist who's on a no-fly list, but his name is actually Julian Assange of WikiLeaks, who now for over 36 days has been gagged and isolated from visitors and any form of communications, cutting off his internet after the United States State Department pressured Ecuador to make this move in the Ecuadorian embassy that he has been in for over 2,703 days, detained there without any charges because of the possibility of extradition to the United States from unknown crimes that he has not yet been officially charged with. So yeah, there's a lot of similarities to this story, and even if you add the fact that private corporation and technocrats like Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, as well as Twitter, Google, YouTube, Amazon, and all these other technocrats that literally give over every piece of information about you to the US government, if it's not data mined by the NSA data bulk collection that literally is there just to get as much information on you as they can without even processing it correctly or even going after actual terrorist attacks that are supposed to be happening, totally making that the second primary objective here, while NSA agents were literally caught masturbating to people's private photos that they illegally collected from everyone. Yeah, that actually happened. We have to understand here that there's another form of soft censorship, which is very different from the hard censorship that happens here in China, but is very effective to closing down any dissenting voices, censoring them, isolating them, and also making sure that their message doesn't get out to the larger public, like we have seen the big technocrats do, especially with independent media. And even as Facebook, that announced just yesterday that, quote, they will be ranking news outlets by their, quote, trustworthiness, which is the same metric that the Chinese are using with their social credit score, whether someone is, quote, trustworthy or not, which now Facebook will use to determine what you see in your news feed features. And as we have seen before with Facebook demoting, censoring, isolating content specifically that is contradictory to the status quo or against them or any big government institution or even just being anti-war, those posts, those pages, those individuals like myself and others have been hit dramatically with our reach, if not sometimes just being blatantly totally censored. So even though this soft censorship is not as blatant and in your face as the Chinese, it is definitely a lot more effective with the same desired effects and without people having to actually face it and see it, and there being less controversy behind it. And it's not just the soft censorship that people here in the United States have to worry about, but also the expanding powers of the executive, which, if you didn't know, can legally assassinate someone without the due process of law and without even a court date, just a personal mandate by the US president. And of course, those programs are expanding, which Donald Trump is even ignoring important deadlines for even just reporting the civilians killed by this specific US drone program, which he did today because the numbers are dramatically going up, which even as of today, we're hearing that 23 civilians were killed in a Syrian airstrike, which is suspected to be by the US coalition, with Donald Trump, of course, expanding US military operations all around the world and dropping record number of bombs on the Middle East right now as we're speaking, with an estimated 40,000 bombs already dropped by this current US president, which sadly he's facing barely any criticisms from, whether it's the left obsessing about issues that are totally irrelevant or the right adoring him and the mainstream media just being completely silent on these issues. The few people who do criticize it sadly have to face the brunt of a lot of the censorship efforts that happen against them. To prove my case even more, these are some other important news updates that happened within the last few moments that you should know about. One is a new bipartisan bill that could give US President Donald Trump the power to imprison US citizens in military detention forever. under a new AUMF law that is being introduced to the U.S. Senate, which of course would set another dangerous precedent for the executive office here in the United States, which already has an incredible amount of power that is specifically unchecked, especially when it comes to U.S. foreign policy, but should be checked. Continuing on in more what in the tarnation news is going on, we also found out yesterday that the United States quietly released Afghanistan's biggest drug kingpin from prison. One of the biggest U.S. allies, Saudi Arabia, had to apologize after an image came on during a wrestling WWE match in their country of a woman dressed in scantily clad clothing, which of course they had to publicly apologize for. Meanwhile, a U.S. judge ordered Iran to pay $6 billion to the victims of 9/11, even though declassified U.S. government documents say Saudi Arabia played a major role in the 9/11 attacks, with 15 of the 19 hijackers coming in from there. And I could keep rambling on about Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United States' involvement with 9/11, but that's a whole other topic. UN's nuclear agency also ruled that there was no credible indications of Iran's nuclear activity being fired up after 2009, which directly contradicts Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, that of course the Europeans are casting doubt on ever since of course his major push for the United States involvement with an Israel-Iranian war. At the same time, Israel is testing their anti-missile systems in Alaska for some reason. Israel also announced that they would retaliate and act forcefully against Russia if they give them the S-300 anti-aircraft missile defense systems to Syria, which of course they're planning on still doing. And in some not so bad news, WWE star Kane is set to actually win the Republican nomination in Tennessee for mayor, which I think is actually great news because I actually met Kane and he actually knew about We Are Change. I, of course, knew about him. He was at some libertarian convention. Ron Paul was there and he's pretty cool. So yes, that is the news for today, May 2nd, 2018. I hope you guys appreciated this program. This Saturday, actually, we lose our Dash sponsorship, which ends this Saturday. And I kind of wanted to ask you guys, we're looking for more sponsorships. We're thinking about possibly doing another Dash proposal, asking them for sponsorship, or maybe a Pivot sponsorship, or maybe even just going with third-party advertisers. What do you guys think is the right way for us to independently sustain this media operation, since it's been extremely difficult with our viewerships being suppressed and also being completely demonetized by YouTube? Your donations, of course, are great and are sustaining us, but with this continued trend, it will be virtually impossible just to survive off donations. So I'm asking you guys, where should we go next? What cryptocurrency should we work with? Should we work with third-party advertisers? How else should we finance this independent media operation? I would love to hear your feedback, which of course I'm going to be answering and following back very closely here on this YouTube channel. Again, thank you so much for being a part of Real Independent Media, because if it wasn't for you watching and sharing and being here with us, I wouldn't be here. That's why I love you guys. Thank you again so much for watching. Stay tuned for more.